And with me now is the federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
So let's start where things stand on a possible inquiry into foreign interference. Pierre Poilievre has met with Yves-François Blanchet. He says he has reached out to your office. Have you started talks yet with the Conservatives?
We've not. But let's take a quick moment to step back. We've called for a public inquiry since the beginning. We were the party that presented 2 motions in Parliament to vote for a public inquiry. We forced those votes forward. The will of the House was to have a public inquiry. And most recently in our vote, not only did we say we needed a public inquiry, but we also wanted Mr. Johnson to step down. And now what do you have? Mr. Johnson has stepped down, and the government's now making some signs that they're considering a public inquiry. We fought hard, and we were able to force the government to do this.
Okay, so just to go back to these discussions this week, are you planning to speak with the Conservatives or the Bloc? What are the factors in a potential public inquiry that you think the opposition parties need to be cooperating on?
So I'm absolutely prepared to speak with all the opposition leaders, and I have responded to Mr. Poilievre, and so we'll have that conversation. But I want to be clear about the path forward. The path forward, what I've suggested, is a similar model to what happens in the provincial parliament in Ontario, where we've got each member of each recognized party has an elected official present in a committee that's responsible for selection in Ontario for any officer of the legislature, but in this case would be specifically for the public inquiry, that it would be chaired by the Speaker. In the case of Ontario, it could be chaired a non-voting member that chairs it, and then we would review the prospective candidates for the position, in this case the public inquiry. So you've got a representative from each of the parties there reviewing the candidates. The candidates need to be vetted. We need to ensure a couple of criteria: that there is no association with, for example, the Trudeau Foundation, given the allegations around foreign interference there, that it's a judge or someone that's a retired judge, and someone that is not donated to a political party in a recent period of time, just to ensure that there's no appearance of bias. Those are some of the basic criteria. There'd be a vetting process, and then we select the opposition, or we select the person that's going to run the public inquiry together. This process is one where we're all in the same room and we're making decisions together. And finally, to set what the parameters of the public inquiry, that's also something we should be doing together. It shouldn't be the case that each opposition leader sends a separate set of demands and then the government receives that and says, oh, there's no consensus. That's not the way to do this. What we want is everyone sitting together, working together, and then delivering a process that works. Okay,
so you've outlined your criteria again, how you want this process to work. Now, we have heard the Bloc Québécois put forward some specific names like Louise Arbour and Erwin Kotler. Do you have any specific names right now?
Well, good point. So the Bloc put forward a name, Louise Arbour. They were strongly critical of Mr. Johnson for his connections to the Trudeau Foundation. On one Google search of Justice Arbour's name and the Trudeau Foundation finds one Google search that she's actually also has some connections to the foundation. So the name that the Bloc provided has the exact same critique that they've had against Mr. Johnson, which is illustrative of why we don't want to just throw out names. We want a process in place. And the process has to satisfy certain criteria so we don't end up in the kind of embarrassing situation the Bloc is in. Their major critique of Mr. Johnson is now being replicated in the name that they've suggested themselves. And that's something that's not helpful in this process. So what we want to do is have a process of a criteria, and then a vetting process of people that can satisfy that criteria, and then as all elected, all official parties, a consensus on selecting the candidate to avoid that kind of embarrassing mistake that the Bloc has just made.
Okay, let me ask you one last question on this. I'll turn from potential names to the actual timeline for this, because you and the other opposition parties have been talking about a need to hold this in a certain time frame to ensure that an inquiry can be complete before a potential federal election campaign. Why are you confident that this can be complete before that happens, given the concerns we're hearing about security, about documents, and about how long public inquiries can last?
It depends on the scope of the public inquiry. And so we've seen in the example of the Emergencies Act inquiry, the Rouleau Commission, that it was done within in a timely manner. That's something that we would like to see happen in this case, keeping in mind the urgency around a potential election happening in the future. We want to make sure that we're hearing, that we uncover the problems and then also present some real solutions that are worked on or implemented before an election. That's really important so that we can restore confidence before an election happens. So given that there would be a deadline naturally because of a potential election, the latest that could be is 2025, but it could happen earlier. We're in a minority government, so it's really uncertain in these cases. So we'd want to have that urgency injected into the public inquiry.
Okay, I want to turn now to another story today. Conservatives want Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino to resign over his office's prior knowledge of Paul Bernardo's transfer to a medium security prison and how that conflicts with the minister's own words in recent weeks. Do you think the minister needs to resign over this?
Well, I'll be asking a question today about that. I think it is really disrespectful to families, to the victims' families, who are having to be re-traumatized by all of this coming out in the news. The pain, the grief, the just incredible suffering that these families have gone through because of what happened to their loved ones. It's horrific. It's unimaginable, the pain that they're experiencing, and they have to be re-traumatized in this way. And for the minister, some now leaks are suggesting that the minister's office would have known prior to the transfer, and then the minister made it seem like he had no clue. These are very troubling questions that arise, and I'll be asking questions about that today.
Okay, I want to turn now to the legislative front as we're nearing the end of the spring sitting. Your party has a new bill on pharmacare. You said you want to keep pressuring the Liberals to uphold its end of your confidence agreement, which includes pharmacare passed by the end of this year. Now, we've heard the health minister say the government is working on its bill but can't promise that it would pass in that time frame. Would that be a deal breaker for your agreement?
Well, we've heard this before. When it came to dental care for children under 12, the government said they couldn't meet the deadline, and we fought hard and we forced them to deliver. They said they couldn't deliver on the dental care that we wanted to see happen for seniors and kids under 18 and people living with disabilities. We fought hard and forced them to include that in the budget. So this is just another example of where we're going to have to continue to fight. We're not surprised. We said this, and I've said this many times, that even though we've got a document that lays out all the things that we have forced this government to agree to do to help people out, that we still have to fight and force them to do it. And we're fighters. We're going to do that. I'm going to fight to make sure the government upholds its side of the bargain. And that means putting pressure on them to say that we've got it in writing here. It's got to be done by the end of this year. We expect it to be done by the end of this year.
Okay, one final question then on the legislative front. You've certainly touted accomplishments linked to that confidence agreement, but as you know, the Liberals are also taking credit for things like dental care. So as you look to the next sitting, possibly even a new session with a new throne speech later this year, taking stock over the past year plus of that agreement, do you think it's been a success for the NDP itself as a party in terms of your electoral prospects?
Well, for New Democrats, our success is determined by, are we helping out people? And on that metric, yes, it's been a huge success. We forced this government to double the GST rebate. That's last year. We made that happen again this year. It's in the budget. Millions of people received a little break to give them some help with the cost of bills, the cost of groceries. We were able to force this government to bring in dental care, which is going to help out millions of seniors and children under 18. We forced this government to bring in for Indigenous, by Indigenous housing and real commitments to funding and building those projects. Nothing that we were able to force this government to do. So we've delivered concrete things as the fourth party in this parliament, the only real opposition party that is setting the legislative agenda and forcing government to work for people. New Democrats are really proud of that, and we're proud that we've been able to give people the break that they needed. But there's a lot more that's needed to be done, and we're not going to let off the pressure. We're not going to let off the gas. We're going to keep on fighting for more things for people.
Okay, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, I want to thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.